Well, the wonderful Jens Stoltenberg is in Britain today, and everybody should be extremely excited about that. If we can get him on screen. And here he is with Ben Wallace this morning. He's meeting Rishi Sunak this afternoon. Rishi, of course, busy in the House of Commons with Prime Minister's questions. So he was with Ben this morning. Well, the first line on the government press release says Jens Stoltenberg will be the first international leader the Prime Minister has hosted at 10 Downing Street since he took office last month. So again, the UK government reiterating the notion that NATO has somehow got borders and somehow got a leader and so on. There you go. So they're going to discuss the war in Ukraine, of course, and in parallel with this, Rishi has decided to make some announcements. So here he is. NATO is the cornerstone of our security and the security of our allies. As the war in Ukraine continues to rage, we must not take peace at home for granted. So whatever's going on in Ukraine, peace at home shouldn't be taken for granted either. And he goes on to say, I'm determined the UK will be the bedrock for NATO for generations to come, but in order to face the challenges we face, we must evolve as an alliance to meet and remain ahead of the threats from our adversaries. So he decided that he was going to announce more winter packs for Ukraine. So just in time for the winter, Brian, they're going to provide 12,000 kits, along with 150 special tents, which can deal with plummeting temperatures. So there we go. The kits contain a cold weather sleeping bag, a bivy bag, and a roll mat. They're also going to provide 25,000 sets of extreme cold weather clothing by mid-December, which is going to include an insulated jacket, trousers, and extra warm boots, gloves, and socks. Are you impressed?
Well, no, I'm not impressed, Mike, because the amount of equipment that's being sent isn't enough to do anything for the Ukrainian forces, whether it's missile systems or tanks or other or ammunition. And so warm clothing is the same. This is not enough to make any substantial difference to the Ukrainian forces. And there was part of the image you had on screen was another 9,000 British trained troops going to Ukraine. Well, of course, at the rate of losses that most people assume at the moment, those men are going to last a month, 1 month.
Indeed. Now, yesterday, Ben Wallace was busy as well. He was meeting, here he is on screen, meeting the Estonian Minister of Defence. And so the UK has decided to periodically deploy helicopters to Estonia as part of the enhanced cooperation between the two nations. This is part of the forward, the rapid response, forward rapid deployment. Yes, thank you. I couldn't think of the word. These will be augmented. The normal forward presence will be augmented with periodic deployments of additional capabilities, including Apache and Chinook helicopters. So that's all very exciting. But the point is more pressure on the Russian border.
Well, it's keep the war going. The aim is to keep the war in Ukraine going until they can really have a go at regime change. And there's now some suggestion of setting up a Russian government in exile. We've got the American forces setting up a new headquarters in Germany in order to better control the war in Ukraine. This is all about keeping the war going.
Did you mean a Ukrainian government in exile?
No, I meant Russian government in exile.
How does that work?
Well, because your objective is regime change in Russia, so you set up a government in exile to help the process along.
I see. Righty-ho. But in the meantime, Alex, Richard Kemp, regular Twitter, yes, is pushing for fighter jets to be sent, British fighter jets to be sent actually to the operational scene in Ukraine.
So he is saying, Mike, and Brian will quickly correct me, but I think that's an F-16 looking at the hood there from stock photos. So we don't have any of those to give anyway. But that just really prompts the question, what kind of airframes would we be giving? Would they be British pilots in them? Would there be British pilots training the pilots either in Britain or in Poland? All a bit of a mess. We know that Rzeszów in southeastern Poland is both an air and land base of continual resupply of the Ukrainians. It throws it up into doubt, really, how embroiled we're going to get. The next Eastern Approaches podcast, which will go up on the homepage and which is already available on UK Column's SoundCloud channel, is an interview I did with Andrew White, an Englishman who runs one of the sections of the Estonian public broadcaster, ERR. It's largely about media freedom in that country, but we do get into the question of British military aid towards the end. Also, the recent leak, which I translated and published from a German source, of the German federal attempts to indoctrinate children using soldiers in the classroom, made mention of a Russian government in exile being planned. And indeed, should the war fortunes reverse, as they now seem to be, and should the Ukrainian government have to decamp from Kiev or even from Lviv into Poland, that has been thought of as well. Apparently, the Russian government in exile would be in Riga, Latvia, where there's a lot of Russian speakers, but the Ukrainian government in exile would be housed by the Poles.
Well, you were right in F-16, Alex, and I'm just astonished at the ignorance of Richard Kemp in this, to suggest that we're going to provide aircraft which are going to change the situation. Russia's already established air superiority. We're not going to be giving the Ukrainians these type of high-spec aircraft, and if we did, the training is going to take years. So I'm just going to say utter nonsense from Richard Kemp. Let's come back to the reality on the ground, and I'm going to recap on a little segment from Monday, which I wasn't able to cover properly because, unfortunately, I hadn't queued up the video for our audience, but let's have a look at it today. What we were describing was the fact that the situation on the front is now that the Ukrainians are attacking repeatedly with relatively small forces, and as a result, they are back suffering very high losses because the Russians have reinforced and consolidated, but it's very clear of the suffering of the soldiers on the Ukrainian side. And I want to play this little video footage from Defence Politics Asia so that we can see what I missed from the news on Monday. So let's play the clip.
It's Asia, and I just saw a video on the social media that is actually from the Ukrainian side, where there is a Ukrainian soldier within this Voleda region, and it's very insightful. Let's watch.
Так, братва. Последний бой, он главный самый, да? Напиздували пидорасом. Сука, аж плакать хочется, блядь, якщо чесно, блядь. А все нормально. Будем живы, не помрем. Кругова оборона. З усіх сторон підараси. 4, блядь, бойця нахуй. 5. 5, верніше, блядь. Вчора от бали еліту Росії кришили вчора. І сьогодні. Стоїм до кінця. У мене ще є, блядь, за 1000 патрон, блядь.
Look at his expression.
Дивіться, українці, це відео і пам'ятайте, хто тут стоїть. Як ми стоїмо.
He looks like he wants to cry. To me, he looks like he wants to cry. He's holding back.
Сьогодні 1 листопада. Я всіх дуже люблю вас. Ой.
And somehow you see it seems like a last word kind of video. So he worries that he'll be forgotten.
Який гарний день. Там наші пацани відрізані, а там підараси вже їбашать з усіх стволів. Тільки що прилетіли по нас гради. АГС. Піхота наступає. Цілий день, 2 дня подряд. Ми в такому мінусі знаходимося. Коло Єгорок, якщо ви знаєте.
So we want to pause the video. So you can see that in the video he said that in the translation he said that he's at Yehorivka, and he suggests that people should know where it is, and he said that Pevkur has been taken. So if you look at the information that we have already reported there was fighting in this region where the Russians launched a major assault at the Voleda region, and Yehorivka is actually south of Pevkur. It's actually here. So this soldier here, he is actually sitting or entrench himself within this region, and my suspect is that he's actually within this forested within one of this forested region, and he say that Pevkur has been taken. So let's watch further, see what he says.
Павловка вже взята, 72-га бригада отошла, фланга в нас немає. Нас криють безбожно. Я не знаю.
You see, he wants to cry. He's holding back.
Кожен свій день.
See, that's the final words. Is his last words.
Кожну хвилину свого життя цініть. І пам'ятайте, за що ми тут стоїмо. 8-й місяць.
See the tears in his
В
eyes.
голоді, не скажу, що в голоді, в окопах з мишми, з комарями, з мухами, з черв'яками, з підарасами, які насипають регулярно. Але ми стоїмо. Так, братва.
Yeah, that's the video.
So an immensely poignant video, but this is the reality of the war. Ukrainians in dispersed formations. He's in the tree line at the edge of a field. He's surrounded. He believes clearly that he is going to die. And what have we got Ben Wallace and team doing at this very moment, but attempting to pump more so-called trained troops in who are going to end up in the very same situation. So as we said on Monday, very brave Ukrainian troops, but of course they have no idea that they're really being used for this proxy war for the US, UK, NATO and the EU. How are they going to die? Well, probably if they're lucky, they're going to be shot and die quickly. But the other thing which we showed, and I'll just let this clip run and I'll talk over it. On Monday, we showed this clip and I identified this attack as white phosphorus. What you will actually see is these glares in the sky, which increase as they fall. And the Ukrainian soldiers identify this as phosphorus. But somebody's emailed the UK column to challenge us on this, and I'm happy to accept the challenge. But of course, the reality is that soldiers on both sides are dying horrific deaths as a result of the desire for war by the West. So you see, as this gets lower, this raining fire is extremely dangerous, and you can tell that these men are very disturbed by what they're watching. Well, the email that came in from Jasmine said at the 27:20 mark of the above episode, that's Monday's news, you claim what you will witness here is clearly the use of phosphorus by the Russians. What evidence do you have to support this statement, apart from a Ukrainian soldier being filmed making the same claim? To my knowledge, this incendiary weapon is the Russian ML5, the incendiary element from the 9N510 warhead of the 120mm GRAD rocket system. The ML5 uses a thermite mixture, not phosphorus. Now, I've done a little bit of investigation as a result of this email, and we're very pleased to get the email. But I'm going to say that a Ukrainian soldier on the front, I would believe, would have a very good idea of what weapons he's facing. But maybe that's not the case. This is the object of the email. So here's some detail about this particular ML5 submunition. And what it says is that it's got incendiary elements of magnesium cups filled with a thermite mixture. So possibly what we're seeing is this, and I accept the element of doubt. But the email goes on to say it's also counterintuitive that Russia, having rigidly adhered to international law in the special military operation up to this point, would use a weapon that contravenes Article 2 of Protocol 3 of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons as it applies to the use of incendiary weapons upon personnel. People can freeze the screen to get the rest of this email, but I want to say that if you actually follow this link up, you come to this, United Nations, here's the convention, and you eventually come to 3 protocols at the top of the inset box. Protocol 1 is non-detectable fragments. Protocol 2, prohibitions or restrictions on the use of mines, booby traps and other devices. And Protocol 3, prohibitions or restrictions on the use of incendiary weapons. And if we go through to the detail on that, and again, we'll leave this for people, or people will be able to freeze it to read the detail. What I'm going to say is that when you read this, this is all about protecting civilians in the first instance. It is not about protecting troops on the ground. And also, phosphorus is not identified separately as a particular substance. And if you research further, you will find that this is commented on quite a lot. So here is a particular article. I could have chosen many. They're backed up by papers at law. But this one says allegation of white phosphorus munitions being used by Russia and Ukraine emerge. Read if it's considered a chemical weapon, and is it illegal to use it during war? And if you get into the detail, in fact, there is nothing actually banning the use of white phosphorus if it is being used against troops. And one of the things that the Russians have consistently said is that where they're shelling or attacking built-up areas, they have already ascertained that there are not civilians in those areas. So we'll leave the audience to think about that. I'll just add that for our own military, we fall into a perilous state as we're giving equipment to Ukraine. We can't even keep our own fleet safe. And we have this incredibly dangerous incident of a major fire on one of our Trident nuclear submarines. These are the bombers, the nuclear deterrent boats. So it was a fire, an electrical fire, which got so bad that the submarine actually had to come to the surface in order to clear the air from the submarine. But what we learn in the article from The Sun is that it was overdue for a major refit. And this reinforces information that's been given to the UK column that the Royal Navy's maintenance and refit capability is increasingly chaotic. This story also reported in the Daily Mail here. And there is this key bit, the 30-year-old vessel, which is overdue a major refit, broke surface in the North Atlantic to flush out toxic fumes. This is an absolute no-no because, of course, the moment that submarine came to the surface, its covert mission was completely blown apart. But the fact that we're now getting major fires in nuclear deterrent nuclear submarines is very serious.